Absolutely. And I think, more than the physical state of being, you've spoken about in the last couple of minutes, about eating, about, working out, about the schedule that you have with your daughter. Does this all also go into how much you work here? Like, what's the workout that you do for your mind? Because I feel when I listen to not just your podcast, you are an author right now, and you had to jump into different shoes. By that I mean different mindsets when you're doing that. How does Varun do that?
It's tougher when you have to move headspaces in one single day. It's easier to do if you batch it up. Like even if I'm doing two kinds of podcasts in a day, right? I'm doing a business podcast and suddenly I'm moving to something where I'm talking about personal development and how do you kind of, focus your mind. I've got to take a certain period of time to kind of switch off from it. And that, while the worst thing to do, which I do very often, is to kind of watch something and just tune out. I've realized that like even something like just watching a cricket highlight really like switches your mind off. You go back into it and you're fine. But I just like to I make sure there's a break between it. I take these small like 15-minute between meetings, between recordings, between work. And those really help. I realize they keep me fresh, but I'm constantly prepping. So oftentimes the execution is not the problem. It's the preparation that's the problem. Right? So for instance, I'll give you an example. I do Take a Pause, which is these tiny bite-sized episodes, largely. And I do Take a Pause, which is these bite-sized episodes, like 2 to 3 to 4 minutes. But what I'm constantly doing is, because I consume a lot of content, because I'm constantly reading or just like, listening to a podcast, watching interviews. I'm always taking screenshots, noting down things which I like and putting them onto separate scribble. I call them scribble notes. So literally my Apple Notes has literally like 5 to 6 of those sheets, which are just filled with screenshots, specific instances in a podcast, which you can luckily kind of shift and it will play from that point if you have to revise. I go through highlights from books, which I read. And so by the time I've gone into record, I can record 8 episodes in an hour, which is what I just literally did before we got into this recording, right? Sat for an hour, got 8 episodes done. If I had to sit and come up with each of those at that point of time, it will take me a lot more time to do. But
makes sense.
What makes it helpful is I've prepared. Similarly, when I do any of my other podcasts as well, I'm making sure that my producer sends me some notes. I'm also spending 20 minutes at least or 30 minutes at least before every recording, really looking at not what my guest has said as much as what they like to talk about. I try to see what space they operate in, what people are really talking about that space. Correct. So I do a little bit of that. The Take a Pause conversations are a lot more research driven, because there you have to go deeper into human psyche, deeper into motivations and everything else. So there we go a little deeper, and thankfully my producer gives me a lot more, I would say, matter there to kind of deal with. The business ones are easier, because if you're in the business space, you know what to ask. You just have to pick a few pieces and you kind of play with that and you move with it. Even with work, I've realized that just making sure you give yourself time to block yourself off to work. The problem we all have is we fill our days with meetings. We never fill ourselves time to actually sit and do the work. I struggled with that for a long time. Right? Is that you do meeting, and then you finish the day. I'm like, oh my God, I have so much work to finish. I haven't gotten down to anything.
Correct.
So now I have blocks of time through the week, and I obviously privilege is the fact that when you're in leadership, you can do those things. Is I just block time for like focused individual work. That's how I wrote the book as well. I would just block out time to sit and write early in the morning, sometimes in the afternoon. And you just do that. And there are some days, especially now with physical and in-person and meetings happening also with digital, I will have days when I'll just do physical meetings. Mostly twice a week, I'm sure I'm out. But I try to make sure that at least 2 days in a week, I'm just at home. So, and I think now the good part is everyone's kind of flexible with that. Everyone's kind of dealing with the same problem.
That's true.
But the biggest problem is all of us spend our day in meetings and we have evenings to kind of do the actual work.
Yeah.
And that's when our brain is the most tired, right? Your brain's been through all these meetings all day long, all the discussions, you ending the day, I'm like, oh my God, I have so much to finish. So you work late into the night, you don't get enough sleep, and you start off the day next day on a back foot. Whereas like I find the afternoons to be the best period. A lot of people say get your most important tasks done first thing in the morning. I actually love the afternoons. Start off individual work right around lunch break for most people. I eat lunch a little later. I eat lunch about 2:33 in the afternoon. So between that 1 and 3 is a good time to get a lot of individual work done, because no one's going to ask you for a meeting mostly during
around
that time. They're all having lunch, or they'll have like a team meeting or something like that, right? So that's my block. My block is that between my sweet spot is between 1 and 3, where I will do all this. Most calls, meetings, etc. are post 3, or between, let's say, 9, 10, and 12. And that's how I kind of bridge it together. Again, the fact that I can look at my calendar and say yes and no to things a lot more easily than someone who's, let's say, doing a regular day job is basically the privilege I've earned. But that's what you should work towards. You can batch your day together, and then eventually you get stuff through. But don't do focused work before you go to sleep is the only thing I'll say, because you sleep wired and you don't sleep well. So I try to like even read something which is totally like mentally switched off. I read philosophy oftentimes before I go to sleep. It's great to listen, to kind of read. It's not that it puts me to sleep, but I think it gives me more peaceful sleep.
All right. I think two things that I do very differently, and I think both of us are on the same privilege level, because today I was able to come back home just because I'm in the leadership role, right? I can't do that when I'm having a 9 to 5, for example.
Exactly.
Right? And I think the way I have tried to jump on between tasks is I try to put a little pressure on my brain, because as a young child, it was always the last moment I would study just to sort of scrape through, right? It didn't get me well in college, but what I usually do is I do something called the daily munchies, which is again 2 to 3 minutes, a quick thought that comes in my mind because I scroll through Instagram and I'm like, this is a good quote. What is my thought about it? And I share it. So just 15 minutes before going to work is when I quickly switch on my laptop, open GarageBand, and I record that podcast.
Perfect. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I think let's talk about when you were young. Were you doing these things, or was it not at all?
Not at all. So I've innately been someone who comes up with things very quickly. So I'll have an idea very quickly. I'll come with some random thought, and I remember as a kid, I would always remember the weirdest things, never the stuff that mattered. So I would remember what happened in some movie with some character very easily. But you ask me to remember a math equation, then you're gone. Like I was that person.
I think that's like 99%. I'm saying that's like 99% of the crowd that's listening to this.
Yeah, and that's what I realized, that you remember stuff which you actually enjoy. It's tougher to remember stuff you don't enjoy, right? And I was that. So it's never been a problem for me to come up with stuff. It's always been a problem to clearly articulate it and to build a system around it. I always, I think for way too long, I relied on, I can do this, I'll wing it. And I winged my way through my 20s and my, even I think an early part of my 30s still. At some point I sat down and said, my interest in this space actually made me learn it. I used to always think of anything which is, let's say, self-help or philosophy or real mumbo jumbo. And why do you need to learn these things? Let's focus on learning the stuff that helps you do the work. But at some point, either it was podcasting, I don't know, or was it the fact that I might have just got the right book at the right moment or something like that. I just started to work on saying, okay, how can I do this while not being so hyper and putting myself in that pressure spot every time. This presentation, literally on the drive to the presentation, I'm making the presentation. You're relying on individual strengths, which you naturally have to kind of get through things. Never truly prepared for anything. So which is why an early part of my 20s was really bad, because failed through my engineering, didn't do well in school, till I reached an MTV where I felt this is work I can do, because that
Correct.
required you to come up with stuff on the fly all the time. I was great at reality TV because nothing was, even though you could plan everything, everything that can go wrong will go wrong. Right. So you're always thinking on the fly, which is I loved being a producer during that phase, because you didn't have to, you would make plans, but the plans would never stick because things would change. And I think that's what we all fall into. We all fall into the trap that we rely on our strengths a lot more. We don't, kind of not, I don't say weaknesses. I think we rely on our strengths way too much, and that makes us overuse them. Now, you don't have to be strong with everything, but if you overuse your strengths, at some point, something's going to give. And rather than finding a more balanced way to kind of look at how you perform in life, and that only, to be honest, I feel it only happens with age. I've realized this. I don't think I would have even if I had learned some of these things in my, by the time I was 25, 26, I don't think I would have practiced them.
Okay.
Because I would have been, but I'm managing it. What's the problem?
Correct.
So yeah, that's how I kind of evolved it, if I put it that way.